Chapter 8. After I recovered, Ramsey, Jeff, and I resumed our journey eastward. In those days, there was a whole counterculture of world travelers who endured the hardships of a very low budget. Most were adventurous and many spiritually inclined. At times, we met in the most unexpected places. In Erzurum, Ramsey and Jeff met some traveling brothers who had convinced a bus driver to let them ride for free on a company bus traveling to Tehran. The bus was only half filled with supplies, so there was plenty of room for a few passengers. In this way, joining them, we crossed the border of Turkey and entered Iran. Once inside the impressive immigration building on the border, we took note of the wall-sized photograph of the Shah. Even more sobering was a sign posted by the U.S. State Department. In big letters, it warned American citizens that in Iran, the penalty for possession, transportation, or selling of hashish or opium products was death. If one was arrested, the State Department had little influence to help. The bus driver was delayed by immigration formalities, so we went to wait inside the bus. It was evening. Soon a crowd of children gathered to see the strange foreigners through the bus window. Although they wore ragged clothes, they were beautiful children. I smiled at a small boy of about 4 years old, but he glared back at me with such intense hatred in his eyes that I lost my breath. How is it possible for such a small child to possess such hate? I was to be haunted by repeated nightmares of his stare. I thought how frightening it was to see how impressionable children are. By family and surroundings, they can be conditioned to love, fear, or hate before they are even able to reason. We arrived in the ancient city of Tabriz. As I explored the streets on my own one day, one kind family invited me into their home, a 2-room abode made of brick. The women of the family had been working painstakingly for several years on a single Persian rug. Mother and daughter sat on the floor of their simple hut, creating precious art. The intricate designs may have up to 250 handmade knots per square inch. Naturally dyed wool shone with dazzling colors, each one with a life of its own: red, blue, green, orange, yellow, white, and violet. These were but a few of the colorful yarns they stitched so meticulously. So simple and gracious was their hospitality that I felt like part of the family. They didn't speak a word of English, but that didn't matter. For dinner, all the men of the family sat on the floor and invited me to join them. They first recited a beautiful prayer of thanksgiving before enjoying the flat bread and tea. As we munched happily on the homemade food, their 10-year-old son entered the door smiling proudly. He held a great surprise in his clenched hands: dates from their tree. Moving toward me, he placed the sumptuous fruit on my plate. Everyone laughed and exclaimed my good fortune. 5 times a day, the family abandoned whatever they were doing to offer prayers to Allah and the holy city of Mecca. The natural devotion of these humble souls moved my heart. I thanked God for this experience and thank this family for their kindness towards a wayward stranger. Our bus cruised through the mystical terrain of Iran. As far as the eyes could see, the flat, arid desert expanded in all directions. Hours passed with no sign of life. From time to time, sandy hills or villages of tiny clay houses appeared in the distance. We drove during the cool parts of the day and all night long. One night, the moonless sky filled with a multitude of stars that sparkled beyond the horizons on all sides. Fascinated by the beauty, we stared through the bus windows. My fellow travelers urged me to play my harmonica. Gazing into the ocean of stars, I played a spontaneous song of my sincere yearning for God. I poured my heart into that instrument. As my tearful song played, the bus fell silent. When it ended, everyone exclaimed. I looked around and saw more than a few passengers weeping. Smiling, Jeff patted my shoulder from the seat behind, while in front, Ramsey flicked his thumb up in approval. I was humbled, knowing that I really didn't know how to play the instrument well. I thanked God and Jimmy the Bear back in Opelika. It was while traveling across the Iranian deserts that concern for my mother and father flooded my heart. They had expected me home several weeks earlier and had not heard from me since Athens. They must be suffering miserably. Why then did I not write to them? The truth was, I didn't know how to compose the letter. Whatever words I might use to try to explain my resolve to travel overland to India, their hearts would shatter. What could I do? My search for God had become the only thing I was living for. If I neglected it, I knew I would be a hollow shell. Mother and father had dedicated their lives and souls to the welfare of their 3 children. Both came from poor Jewish families whose immigrant parents fled from Lithuania, Romania, Russia, and Poland to escape religious persecution. As far as we knew, all the relatives who'd remained were later murdered by the Nazis. My mother had lived through a difficult childhood. As a small girl, she suffered her father's early death. Then soon after, her elder sister was attacked in an alley and left traumatized for life. As a teenager, my mother had to work to support her ailing mother, her now handicapped elder sister, and her younger sister. But she was always cheerful and grateful for whatever God had given her. Later in life, she served her husband and children faithfully 24 hours a day, but she never abandoned her first family, quietly scrimping and saving to send relief. While raising 3 sons, she single-handedly did all the chores of the household, including cleaning, washing, and ironing clothes, shopping, and cooking an amazing feast every evening. She was slender, radiant, and dressed meticulously. The parents of all my friends marveled at my mother's beauty and grace. Her willingness to help others extended beyond her family. As long as I could remember, she joyfully volunteered to serve in various charitable organizations, performing fundraising dances in particular. And my brothers and I were always on guard lest she suddenly give our used toys or clothes away to Goodwill. Throughout our lives, she had emphasized the virtue of gratitude. She was sure to ask if we had thanked the parents of my friends if I ate at their houses, sure that I offered thanks to whomever showed kindness to me. Of all the displeasing traits children could exhibit, ingratitude disturbed her the most. Consequently, she was sure not to spoil us by satisfying our whims. And whenever we were given a gift, she stressed, "It's the thought that counts." She led by example. Whether she received a gift of precious jewelry or a simple flower, she was equally thrilled. In this, she taught me that happiness comes not from the material thing, but from the love with which it is given. She took immense pride in seeing whatever good we did. Whether the results were big or small, she was happy as long as our efforts were honest. Time and again she revealed her selfless service to us. When I had suffered my dislocated shoulder, she was there within moments to drive me to the hospital. After surgery, the first person I saw at my bedside was Mother. I coughed and pleaded, "Mom, your cigarette is making me sick." As was the fashion of American women at that time, she had been smoking 2 packs of cigarettes every day for over 15 years. But the thought that she caused me pain greatly affected her heart. As she frantically extinguished the cigarettes, tears welled in her brown eyes. Ashamed, she came to my bedside and stroked my cheek. "Darling Richie, if my smoking causes you pain, I promise you to never touch another cigarette for the rest of my life." She never smoked again. My father shared much in common with my mother. He had to leave school at 15 due to shortage of food at home, and labored to assist his parents in the time of the Great Depression. Later, as a married man, he worked hard to financially maintain his aging parents and sickly mother-in-law, along with his own family. Financial challenges seemed to follow him like a shadow. In 1958, when I was 7 years old, he and my uncle Irving invested everything they had in a promising business venture. They became the largest automobile dealership in the Chicago area for a brand new line by Ford, the Edsel. But Edsel's sales plummeted, becoming infamous as one of the greatest failures in automobile history. Consequently, my father sunk into bankruptcy and lost everything. I watched as he struggled, working long hours to protect us from poverty. Besides providing for the welfare of his children, my father loved to play sports and games with us, and when he had time, took me to football and baseball games. Later, he opened a shop for auto repairs, and in time, with hard work, became quite wealthy. Still, from the age of 15, I worked various jobs after school hours and during school vacation. I never wanted to add to the burden of my parents, a value I had absorbed by their example. The day before I was to leave home for college, my father was especially emotional. "Richie," he said, "let's take a ride together." We drove along the tranquil streets of Highland Park's Sherwood Forest, surrounded by the sounds of children laughing and playing. "Son," he began, "as long as I'm alive, I'm always here for you." Stopping the car, he held my hand, and his voice quivered. "As your father, I expect you to do your best. But whether you succeed or fail, do good or bad deeds, or even betray me, as long as I'm alive, I'll love you, and I am here for you. This is a promise I will live and die to keep. Please never forget this." Overwhelmed, I listened. I knew that he meant every word he spoke. Sure enough, he remained true to his promise, although I was to test him beyond his farthest expectations. The bus stopped on a hill outside a village, and I was lifted out of my reminiscence. I lifted my duffel bag off the floor, untied the strings, and pulled out a pen and an Iranian aerogram. The moment had come to explain my resolve to my parents. "My dear family," I wrote, "everything has been going well with me. Roads get bumpy at times, but they are fine roads. I have been doing much thinking and have found that now is the time when I will do something I have been longing to do. Much thought and much contemplation has gone into making it clear that this is the right way. Throughout the world, people look at life through different windows. For almost 20 years, I have been seeing through the eyes of a Western man. I have seen and experienced the laws, philosophies, religions, arts, and overall ways of life of the West. Now I will see how life is lived in the East. I do this not to escape my previous life, but to see another. It is something I cannot see through schools, because schools can only tell me about this through slanted points of view. So I will go to the East myself. What greater education is there than that? I am not doing this to worry you, so please don't hurt yourselves by worrying. It is impossible to write to you as often as I would like. Sometimes I simply cannot find a post office. Gary is no longer traveling with me. He is in Israel. I always have companions. Give my love to all my friends and relatives. Richard. The letter was postmarked Iran and had no return address.